and tables. But this year we thought it'd be helpful to have a little bit more education as well. So Kelsey Johnson is with us. She's part of the Lutheran Office for Public Policy in Wisconsin. You're a Hunger Advocacy Fellow. I'll let you tell us what that means, because I don't really know what that means. But then we'll also have time, and she has brought along letter prompts too that can kind of say, hey, I'm a Lutheran, this is why I care and what I care. And so without further ado, we'll let you go from there.
Thank you.
Thanks, welcome.
Good morning. My name is Kelsey Johnson, and I work for the Lutheran Office for Public Policy in Wisconsin. I'm located in Madison, Wisconsin, and I am the Hunger Advocacy Fellow for this year. And what that means is there's a grant for young people to get involved in advocacy work, and that's through ELCA Global Hunger. And it's a one-year opportunity for me to learn about advocacy and the Office for Public Policy. There's 5 of us this year, so quite a few, and we're located in different state public policy offices throughout the U.S. A little bit of background information about me. Last year I served as a young adults and global mission volunteer through the ELCA, and I was deployed to Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank for a year, and I taught English and art there. And so that kind of informed an interest in advocacy that kind of naturally led into this position for this year. So LOPPW, how many of you have heard of the Office for Public Policy in Wisconsin? Okay, so quite a few. We're part of the ELCA Advocacy Network, which we have a main office in Washington, D.C., and several different state public policy offices throughout the country. We work with the ELCA main office for national issues, but mostly our office focuses on public policy in the state of Wisconsin. Like I said, we're partnered with ELCA World Hunger because a lot of the issues that we tackle directly relate to hunger. So for our office, we focus on sex trafficking, environmental issues, as well as hunger and poverty, and immigration. And we work in partnership with all of the synods with congregations in the state of Wisconsin. So that also includes parts of the Upper Peninsula. So if you're interested, these are the synods that we are partnered with throughout the state. Does anybody know what advocacy is? Can you give maybe a quick definition of advocacy?
Advocating for people out of our Christian experience and beliefs who are in need of support.
Yeah, exactly. So advocacy is something that is informed by our faith, and there's many ways that we can do this. We can become aware of people's struggles, we can hold forums and listen to them, we can strategize about solutions, we can write letters, which is something that we'll get into today. We can connect with other groups, such as LOPPW, and a good way to stay informed about our work is to sign up for our advocacy alerts. If you go onto our website, loppw.org, we have many different resources, but if you give us your email address, you can sign up for alerts, and we don't spam you with emails or anything like that. It's just when something pertinent is happening, we can keep you kind of in the loop for how our faith advocates for social justice. Okay, so like you mentioned, caring for our neighbor is part of who we are as God's people. Our faith definitely connects with advocacy, and it's part of our history. Have any of you heard of the common chest? Yeah, the common chest was part of the foundation of Lutheranism. Does somebody want to share what the common chest was?
Everyone's looking at me. It's like community chest in Monopoly. Essentially, it's where people would give what they had or extra that they had, and it could be a source of funding or to provide for the needs of those who had needs. So it's a little bit like more socialistic in the sense of people providing for each other kind of blindly almost. I don't know, maybe that's going too far, but it's a little bit. It was a communal effort to provide for those who didn't have enough.
Perfect.
Okay,
Good
good.
answer. So it provided immediate help for those who were in need within the community. And I'm surprised when I present or talk to people, not everybody knows that this is kind of the foundation, part of the foundation of our faith. Yeah, so it's part of who we are. Advocacy is part of who we are based on this foundation. How many of you, by a show of hands, have heard of ELCA social statements? And how many of you have read the social statements? Okay.
Some of them?
Yeah, there's a lot. And I recently became aware of them as a young adult and global mission volunteer. I had no idea they existed before then. But they're available on the ELCA website. And the social statements take a really long time to write, like 15 years sometimes. So they're made through collaboration with anybody who's an ELCA member can contribute to it. So have any of you been a part of contributing or editing social statements? There you go, a few of you. That's pretty good. Yeah, so they take a really long time to write. They're a collaborative effort, and they kind of interpret our theology and give a lens for social justice on different issues. We are a public church. We're informed by our values, and they're reflected in our teachings, and that's kind of how LOPPW reflects its values. And I have a short video to show. Take a short pause for the audio. I had a feeling this is.
That's why. Last I checked, 0 was not a good volume for.
Part of our baptism.
Okay, I'll just restart it.
If it's not loud enough, let me know.
Okay.
We're involved in advocacy because it's part of our baptism. As Lutherans, we say that we'll strive for justice and peace in all the earth, and that because we've been justified by God, by faith, through grace, that the God who justifies then sets us free to do justice and turns us away from ourselves and towards our neighbor.
We see advocacy as key in that role because we connect our congregation, we connect our voices with the members on the Hill, and we also provide a conduit for our state offices.
What we are called to speak upon comes from our social statements, from our theological values, from what congregations and pastors are interested in doing.
I think stories abound of examples from the scriptures of people who were very active in doing advocacy to improve the society's situation.
And our goal isn't necessarily to change their minds, but it's to educate and provide resources to congregations and members of Congress and equip them to do advocacy themselves as well.
Lutherans, I think, are uniquely positioned to do advocacy in a bipartisan way because we're neither red nor blue. We're very purple as a church, and I think that gives us a particular strength.
We are nonpartisan. We tend to be bridge builders, gap fillers, so we can help, we believe, navigate in a way that other entities may not be able to do so.
Our faith is not couch potato faith. It's not what we believe, it's what we do with our belief. And I think when churches do that, when people in a congregation get together and they see something that's wrong in their community or their state or their country, and they use their voice, it's godly, Holy Spirit work.
We're not here to do the work for the ELCA. We're here to be the on-ramp for our congregations and ministries and the baptized to become involved where they are in the way that they are called to be.
Truly, we need to rise to a level of advocacy and to be willing to speak out when there are issues that are challenging our understanding of what it means to be Christians.
Am I going to be just sitting and just looking at the past history, or I'm going to be a progressive to change?
If you're interested in advocacy or public policy or finding what public discernment means in a really controversial time, our office is here to connect and provide the resources that congregations and people need.
Our commitment to every human being and the people that Jesus cared about doesn't sway with one election or another. Those values remain constant, and our voice in policy making versus politics is critical.
Okay, so give me 1 second, sorry. What struck you about the video? What are some things that kind of stood out?
It was nonpartisan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the quotes is, "We're not a red church, we're not a blue church, but we're a purple church." Yeah, so we're nonpartisan. What else?
We're about policy, not politics.
Yes. Great. Any other comments about that?
Well, politics is given a bad rap, but it's in politics that justice gets worked out. And so we can't, as a church, ignore politics. It's just that we don't want to be partisan.
Right.
We want to advocate for what's just.
Yeah. One of the people in the video says that it's not about what we believe, it's about what we do with our beliefs. There's really that action to it that we're called into by our faith.
I always notice how many bishops I know in that video, and I'm a church geek, so I'm like aware of that, but that this isn't something that just happens at the high levels of church, but also at the low levels. I think that the ecumenical advocacy days and lobby day on Capitol Hill for a lot of bishops is important, which is great. That a lot of denominational leaders have our back, but that doesn't mean they're the only ones in the room, and so. I think that's a nice both and, personally. I just want to say, oh, there's Bishop Mansfield. Oh, there's Pastor Walter from Ascension and the El Salvador committee is in the video. I mean, so that we have connections to those people as well.
Yeah.
Also that it was racially diverse.
Yes. That's something that we're striving for. One of the questions that my boss had for me the first time I saw this video was, is there room for us to be inactive or not take action on social issues within the church? Like, is it okay for us to be quiet?
No.
No. Good. You guys are on it.
It's the right group of people, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are a few different devotions that the ELCA has in their resources. One of them is called Into the World. It's devotions on the social statements. Have you guys used those in your congregation at all?
Not fully.
I encourage you to. Yeah, they're pretty great. So we're going to do an activity from one of those. And just so you know, we do have a new resource that's available. It's called Our Church, Our World, Partnering with God's Mission. So we're going to divide into partners in a second and do this exercise from one of the devotionals. You'll partner up and pick one of the 3 questions there, and I want you to talk about them. You can pick a different question from your partner. So it's what's a personal story that I have about hunger? Or do I have a loved one who has been directly impacted by hunger? What is a story I have about engaging with people who struggle with hunger? Are there biblical verses or catechisms that Martin Luther wrote that have inspired me to care about hunger? So it's your story, someone else's story, or our faith story. So please divide into partners and discuss one or two of the questions.
Come on back. Good.
Groups of three are
Want
fine
husbands
too.
and wives to separate or not?
Just have a quick discussion. So it's okay if it's somebody you know. Yeah.
There is an article.
Yes, we have, haven't we?
Yes, my personal story about
How
no.
kids churn through schools and how that affects them and what the causes of
I'm
that
making
are. And
lunches
how it was out in La Crosse.
Yeah,
I think
20
they
people
got a
today
grant,
and dinners.
$1,000 to use their for trying to reduce the amount of
There were so many.
they were able to help kids
Seems to me
There, which was just, amazing that we talking about beers and all that, but, there's just such a nice atmosphere, and human being is important, not just the wealthy and white. And I
it's
just
something we
wanted
deal with. We don't realize that it's
Right.
Yeah.
What are the stories that
so who are you canvassing for?
Dennis, my
Right.
and they're really pushing.
Yeah.
Greg, the guy, director, I suppose it's Cameron,
Okay.
said that evidently Hutton's group is concerned, Republicans are concerned about Dennis's district. Because
What I mean, that's like
they did
right
something
there.
and they didn't like what they were seeing. So they're sending in a page of people, or is it probably paying people coming on Thursday and sweep through the district. So we're going to sweep through the district again next week.
And I think
But
that's becoming much more.
they have still a couple more lists of people they want to get to before they do just a general, that general sweep again for the election. So the very fact is that he said, I don't know what the information was, I don't know what they saw they didn't like, but obviously they saw something they didn't like, because they're bringing in all these people. And so we'll see.
Let's take a few more moments to wrap up your conversations.
I mean, I was hoping, but it's such a Republican district. We run into some of the state Republicans.
I live on 100th Street and Street, my side.
And I have, I can only go on,
Across the street,
so.
right across the street.
And not every
are
weekend.
Multi-family, mostly duplexes. And I know there's this one, the problem is where there's no. So, I mean, there was a family in here, and I don't know if
All right. Thank you for sharing with one another.
Good luck, but getting us to stop.
Okay, so I would like to kind of go through each of the questions and see if different groups are compelled to share their answers. So, what is a personal story I have about hunger? Or do I have a loved one who has been directly impacted? Did anybody discuss this and want to share?
Well, we have a son who is a single father and with 2 children and working full-time and having to get online to get aid at 5 o'clock in the morning perhaps, and the aid will run out if you're not there early enough. Get aid, and we talk about giving aid, but there's a limit to how much aid. So the people have to get there real early if they want to get some of that aid. It's not always enough to go around.
Thank you. Yes.
So if you're not doing anything later this afternoon and you want to come and help make dinners and lunches for 120 homeless people, that would be lovely use of your time this afternoon, because that's what I'm doing. Here at church, we're cooking for a group called Street Angels, and they go out Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday night, and they drive all over the city, and they bring warm meals and clothing and everything else that goes along with being homeless. And I just got back from Houston, and man, we saw a lot of homeless people, you know, because we were on the freeways and we were driving, and you just look down and there were lots of homeless people, so they're hungry and they have no resources. So,
Thank
I'll be here from 1 to 5.
We talked a little bit about how often it's an emergency or a late Social Security check. You know, the mail, you know, Veterans Day falls on, you know, the right day, then it's, you know, everything's off a day. That can be a big food security issue for lots of people. Or I think about like within my extended family, there's a couple of people who have severe addiction, and for them, it's their family who is left in a lurch. So if they've got to pay for rehab or other pieces, you know, then that becomes it's just one card falls and the whole house comes down. That makes sense in terms of hunger for me.
Would anybody else like to share for this first question? No. Okay, so what is a story I have about engaging with people who struggle with hunger? Did anybody discuss this question?
Well, I was talking about how serving at Cross, we serve once a month there, and what an experience it is to see all the faces of these people coming through the line, and all ages, you know, little children and adults, and it was pointed out, somebody here, how hard it is for those people to be receiving, you know, the people, they would rather get their food on their own, but it's hard for them to accept, you know, the fact that they have to be asking for help and seeking food in this way.
I lived in the Chicago area, and we served a Christmas meal in the uptown area of Chicago. And we learned quickly after doing this we did it several years, that we needed to provide Ziploc bags, because not only did they eat, but they wanted to pack up more and stick it in their pockets and take it home.
When we lived in Dubuque, I took an Ethiopian woman who was studying social work, and she needed an experience, and I was working at the food pantry, so I took her with me to it so that we could fill paper bags with food and hand it out. And she said, no one in Ethiopia will believe that I filled food packages for hungry people in America.
It's true. Yeah, it's true.
I think one of the things that strikes me, like you get some, whether it's at Cross or whether it's at Uptown, which are our two main experiences, you get some grumpy people, but the vast majority of them are truly appreciative of what you're doing. You know, so that's always rewarding.
Thank you. Okay, so are there biblical verses or catechisms that Martin Luther wrote that have inspired you, to care about hunger?
We're going to let the pastor out of Mac for that one.
Yeah, there you go. Who's Martin Luther?
Well,
know, you showed that little clip there about the common chest.
Yes.
That was done because Luther insisted on it. But now I went through seminary, and that was never taught us in all the things we read and heard about Martin Luther.
Me either.
That's recent scholarship that's come out with that. And it's very interesting that even our churches, you know, a generation or two ago, were not talking about this sort of thing. It's coming out now, but it's been there all along. Same with biblical verses. Jesus feeding of the 5,000 and all kinds of prophetic stories of the prophets.
For me, the piece that I don't have a go-to, which is maybe bad. I should think about that. But for me, I'm fairly passionate in my belief that a lot of the conditional connections between receiving food or help with hunger are fairly unjust. That's my own personal take. And I think Scripture says a lot about that piece of it, that God's grace and even the Catechism, all that we have comes from God, kind of without restriction. And so I think that our biblical value about that does butt up against some of the ways in which governments, state, national, and otherwise have tried to, for lack of a better word, control who gets what and what they have to prove or do to earn that. That feels very different than God's economy to me. And so that's the piece that I can go to and talk about for a long time, but I won't because you're here.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to share? What struck you about this exercise? Like, what are some observations or feelings you have after talking about the prevalence of hunger?
I think if we live in the suburbs and we go through life like this, we don't see it. And I think that's a terrible thing.
And you have to put yourself out to find it.
Yeah.
That doesn't come easily.
Yeah, it's part of being a public church. We're told to engage in the world and those around us, and it is really easy to kind of have those blinders on.
I would add to that too, though, like what Nancy was mentioning, is that if you just driving downtown Milwaukee or along some of the freeways there too, if you look, you can see it.
Intense.
But it's too easy to just go where you're going and not look.
Yeah.
But talks like this and awareness like this helps you see that, yeah, the problem is there, and it's right here in our yard too. You know, you don't have to go very far.
Right, it's something that we all have a story about and can find a story about.
And it was encouraging to me to see other people who care.
Yeah. Yes.
An organization I belong to, we've done some service work and have done things with the Hunger Task Force. And unless you're aware of the amount of food that's packaged for the needy, you don't even realize it, because as this gentleman was saying, we sort of live in our own cocoon, and unless you're outside of that and look around, you realize how great a need that is. And I mean, they do hundreds and hundreds of bins of food for people, and they're all appreciative of that.
Thank you. Anybody else?
One of the comments I heard is that, the churches should take care of all that.
Oh.
But it's such a big thing now. There's too many people in need for the churches to do that. That's why we have to try and get our government to give more funds for these people. Our churches can't do it. It started out that way, but it can't do it anymore.
Thank you for connecting that to public policy. So just a bit about food security. Food security exists when people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to nutritious food that meets their needs. It's more than just being fed. It's a level of nutrition. It's physical access to this food. And there are different levels to food security. It can be from low food security to high food security, and there's just a huge spectrum within even our own communities. So that's something to be aware of if you aren't already. And in the US, we've shared stories about it. It's prevalent. And it's not necessarily caused by scarcity of food, but it's interconnected to the prevalence of poverty. And so when we're seeking justice and policy changes, we have to look at the link between poverty and hunger as well. It exists for children. Hunger does not discriminate. It causes health problems, poor performance in school and acting up, as well as in adults. I was really surprised by these statistics, particularly. So 1 in 5 older adults, so seniors, experience at least one piece of food scarcity. So, and then in the state of Wisconsin, it's very prevalent as well. Yep, those are the statistics there. And so the Farm Bill is the policy that links to it right now. Yeah, I love this.
Yeah.
So the Farm Bill is very multifaceted. It's not just dealing with farmers directly. It also involves research, health and nutrition, infrastructure, jobs, conservation, and innovation. And it is like a Swiss Army knife. There are just so many different components of it. And so it breaks down to mostly be about nutrition. And like I mentioned, that affects children all the way up to seniors. It affects a lot of people in the community. And so it's 80% nutrition, and you can kind of see the other pieces of that as well. Yes?
What do you mean by nutrition in that? I mean,
Good question. Yeah. So by nutrition, I mean food assistance programs. In Wisconsin, that means food share. It's SNAP nationally, but food assistance programs for those who are food insecure. Are there any more questions about kind of that so far?
Doesn't it include WIC also?
Yes.
And I forget the initials, but there's a couple of other programs.
Yes. Yeah.
Like that.
Yes.
That are all in the Farm Bill.
Mm-hmm. And so if you're familiar or have been following the public policy, there are 2 different propositions. There's one in the House and one in the Senate. The one in the Senate provides a lot of safeguards for food assistance programs. However, the one in the House is really concerning to us from our faith-based lens, because it would cause a lot of people to lose their eligibility for these nutrition programs. So 11% of Wisconsin food share recipients would lose eligibility under this. And that's because it bumps up kind of the work requirements and different loopholes that people would have to go through in order to qualify for these nutrition assistance programs. Are there any questions about this?
Is the school nutrition program involved in this?
It would affect children, but I don't believe that it directly impacts the school nutrition programs. Yeah, so there's a statistic about children there. 8% of children who currently are under food assistance programs would be disqualified with the new
I think it
House
does affect
proposition.
school.
Yeah, it says they.
Because most of the school stuff is based on your eligibility.
Okay.
So then you're eligible for reduced lunch if you're in school. So
Right.
They wouldn't be eligible anymore because of the.
Thank you, yeah.
So they're opening the size of the safety net holes. So those.
Loopholes.
Right. Well, those safety nets have holes.
Right.
You need to strive for a safety floor.
Right.
They're just making the holes in the net bigger. So people are gonna fall through. So.
Good image.
Yeah, I like that. Are
They like to call it a hammock, but I think that's ridiculous.
Any more questions about kind of the House versus Senate portion of this?
Yes.
Yeah. it's really
Now, is that still before the House, or have they acted on this, or tell us?
What's the state of it?
Right, so it defaulted on September 30th was the deadline for one of them to be chosen, and nothing was done. And so basically what's happened in Wisconsin is we default into programs that were already in place, and yeah, we're still continuing to push on this until they revote and choose one. Yeah.
You say there's a House version and a Senate version,
Mhm.
does both bodies have to support, eventually support one or the other?
Yeah, or combine them with a solution. But since we're like getting nowhere, it would be easier to choose one over the other. Any action, yeah.
And likely won't happen until after November 6th.
Yeah,
So
yeah. The election has
not
kind of
helped it.
thrown a wrench in a lot of things. So yeah, for us, LOPPW, we're kind of waiting until after the election to see a lot more things pick up.
Generally speaking, the Senate is more likely to be open to fully funding these nutrition programs. The House is less open to that. I don't know the reasons, but that's been the way it's gone.
Yeah, the Senate version of the bill is much more bipartisan than the House version.
I mean, I think it's like the inherent partisanship of the House. Like it gets more gerrymandered, and people are, getting primaried into really stringent categories. You start to, if you're really conservative, you start to see this as wasteful spending, and so I think that it creates a lot more pressure on at least one side of the aisle to be
Because
more
of the numbers too.
right. And the thing is, though, you could vote against this, and in one House district that would cost you your seat, another House district that would give you your seat. And I think that depending on, unfortunately, this has become political because they're cutting this because they gave us tax cuts. Because they don't have enough money because they gave us tax cuts. So
The tax cut is in the background.
Right. So.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate that impacts vulnerable communities like this.
And the injustice of it, because the people who benefited mostly from the tax cut were the wealthy. Who's going to pay for it? The poor.
Okay, so on the side table there is a pile of letters. Have you all grabbed one? I invite you to do that at this time. They're in stacks of 3. Make sure that you have one for Senator Baldwin, Senator Johnson, and then one that is kind of a blanket says Dear Representative. So just take a minute to maybe grab those letters and then head back to one of the tables. We're going to do letter writing now. Oh, and also on the table is